I talked about diversity and the government, but a different part of diversity is a topic now, because a leaked video shows the British Prime Minister ranting to party colleagues about trans people and campaigning for them, while the government wants to curtail their rights. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is making headlines again with this transphobia stuff. The British portal Pink News published a leaked video on Sunday in which the Conservative politician made disparaging remarks about trans people. The video was made on June 5th at a meeting of a group of Conservative MPs. And in the video clip, Sunak can be heard poking fun at Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey for trying to convince everyone that women clearly have penises. To laughter from the audience, Sunak said, "You all know I'm a big fan of everyone learning math until 18, which is a government plan, but it turns out we need to focus on biology." This statement drew criticism from opposition politicians and queer organizations on Monday, but it met with too little media attention. And apparently, the climate towards trans people in Great Britain is already so poisoned that a joke about a minority is hardly noticed anymore. Unlike calls for rejection at universities, for example, when, like a few days ago, they once again invited an anti trans activist like Kathleen Stock to an invite debate. Sunak, too, regularly feels called upon to insist on freedom of opinion and research, thereby legitimizing arguments hostile to trans people. In interviews, he himself had repeatedly emphasized that trans women were not women for him. The latest statement by the Conservative Party leader stands for an increasingly anti-trans government. In recent months, there have been several reports that the government, which had been detached from EU regulation, wants to exempt trans people from the protection of the Equal Treatment Act. In future, only the characteristic of biological sex should be protected. And this could just be the beginning of policies to discriminate against trans people, for example, in the use of gender spaces or in sports. In January, London used its veto right for the first time to stop an act of the local parliament with the Scottish Self-Determination Act. And earlier plans for a UK Self-Determination Act had already been shelved by Sunak's predecessors, Prime Minister and party leader Liz Truss, and that by a former Equality Secretary. Meanwhile, reports of plans by the government to deprive students of self-determination seems to be confirmed. Newspapers published drafts of new guidelines over the weekend that schools in England should consult parents even against children's express wishes if their child wants to be addressed by a different name or pronoun or change the gender expression on their school uniform. Without the permission of the parents, these wishes should not be implemented by teaching staff. With everything going on around Brexit, about the right to demonstrate immigrants and queer rights, in a lot of places, the British government is getting more and more an authoritarian government. And I talked a lot about democracy during the 2016 referendum and about elections and where I see problems, but it's still democratic elections under UK law. But they are moving in a direction that is not very democratic anymore, and not to talk about international law either, in case of the immigrants, for example. And yes, there is international law. There was some fool in the comments recently that wrote something different. But this is really worrying me, because we are not only in Brexit, but also in these discrimination that's coming up more and more. We're talking about people's lives here. People harm themselves if they are discriminated like that. And we must not let it come to that. So I'm really worried about these news and about the lack of media attention on that one. That is why I had to make this video this week on this channel, because it didn't get much attention in the UK, and that is worrying too. because I'm not a journalist. I'm just a guy with a camera and an opinion. But I expect, well, that I'm still expecting this from some UK newspapers is probably a joke. But I expect at least that there are still some journalists in Britain that are doing their job and they are bringing out the important topics and not only the topics that sell newspapers. But if you're interested in more UK politics and Brexit and things you might not have heard somewhere else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.